Dr. Kennedy Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to take the call on this second reading on this all-important bill, and I'd like to begin by adding my own thanks in the first instance to Mr. Chris Alconville for his quite astute and sensitive chairmanship of the Select Committee, such as it was that we had. I agree with Ruth Dyson that it made a critical difference to the manner in which we were able to get through to our work, and that was in no small measure to the personal skills of the chairman. Thank you for that. I disagree with only one thing, which he said just a moment ago, to the effect that he saw no causal relationship between the time allocated for submitters and the quality. Normal human nature makes it very clear there is a close correlation and causal correlation between the amount of time you have to make a good submission. The fact that they were able to make there was a high quality of submissions was a testimony to their skills, but not to the integrity of the process, and I think we need to draw that distinction. But thank you for the astute chairmanship. I also want to pay tribute, actually, personal tribute to the Minister himself. I did in Select Committee, and I wish to do so again here. Our criticisms of this bill are in no way intended to attribute any issues of personal trust to the Minister. We recognise the integrity of all members of the House in the government, and also the hard work that he has put in to this bill. I think the issues of trust, as I said in our first reading, are irrelevant. The Green Party is quite critical of both the process behind this bill and the substance, and we'll have more to say about that. But it does not attend to personal issues. And finally, just to pay a word of thanks to the officials that have backed up the Minister. I've seen them in action in the last week or 2 weeks or so, and I will not name them. They would be embarrassed, but they know who they are, and I pay tribute to their skill and their perseverance. The Minister has just distributed an analysis of, a very detailed analysis of the submissions. Obviously, the officials have worked through the night on this, and a very quick cursory reading makes it look like it's very thorough and very professional. And I think it's a tribute to the officials working under the Minister to be able to produce that in a short time. As I more or less intimated in our first reading, all of this is redolent of our September experience, but it is more critical and it is more intense. And so the obligation, the responsibility on us to get this right is heightened, and I doubt there will be any piece of legislation this year in which there is a greater obligation to get this right for the people not only of Canterbury but of New Zealand as well. We said in our minority report that went into the Select Committee report that we continue to have concerns both over process and substance. The Green Party has never been convinced that the legislation for the recovery of Greater Christchurch needed to be taken under urgency, sir. It is important, of course, to scrutinise the reasons for any extension of a state of emergency. And I take the point by the Minister that he and his government are under pressure to end the state of emergency. We, in fact, have been querying the criteria for it and so on. That's the normal requirement on our part. And due provision is rightly in place to restrict the scope and period of such civil defence emergencies. But in our view, Mr. Speaker, there is a stronger justification for extending the state of emergency for several more weeks to allow the normal passage of this SERA bill under normal parliamentary scrutiny than there is to circumvent proper public and parliamentary scrutiny of the bill which contains such far-reaching measures. The absence of adequate consultation with the responsible entities or expert input through the proper Select Committee hearings is to the serious detriment of this draft legislation. We acknowledge that the task of recovery in Christchurch is massive. We acknowledge that the purposes of this bill are appropriate. We acknowledge that there is a role for central government, and an essential role for central government. It does not follow that that role has to be a dominant one. Mr. Speaker, we see potentially three phases in the response to the earthquake. There is first the emergency period, there is a recovery period, and there is a rebuild. In the emergency period, the central government naturally has the dominant role during the immediate crisis, the emergency, when the tanks and the soldiers are in the streets, the USAR rescue teams are feverishly retrieving survivors and bodies, the demolition squads are levelling buildings under urgency. Civil defence under emergency powers are appropriate. That period does not last forever. It has been extended from 22 February to 16 April. The Civil Defence Controller is in charge. That is appropriate. The representative of central government is through him. Local municipalities such as the Christchurch City Council play a secondary role during that period. The search and rescue period is essentially ended. It has been there for almost 2 months. It is entirely possible for it to continue for, say, two more weeks so that this bill can be decently guided through proper parliamentary passage. We then move into the recovery period. That involves the reinstallation of utilities, housing, power, water, sewerage. That is the natural role for the utility operators, acting under the authority of SERA. During this period, let us call it a 9-month period, it's there in the bill, there is the requirement to develop the strategy and the plans. Mr. Speaker, in our view, during that period, the recovery period, the lead should be taken by the local authorities, Christchurch City Council for Christchurch. I recognise that the bill acknowledges the lead role should be taken by the Council. But there should be not only the lead role, there should be sovereign authority on decision-making in our view, and that is where we differ from the government. Because under the bill, sovereignty in terms of final sign-off resides with the central government. Sir, whatever happened to the principle of subsidiarity? You can suspend subsidiarity during the emergency period. You should not continue that suspension of subsidiarity during the recovery or during the rebuild. And then finally, of course, we would have the period of rebuild itself, the third phase. That will take, let us say, 4 years under our 5-year period that we are seeing here in the bill. So why does the rebuild of Christchurch have to be operationalised under the sovereignty of the central government? There is no reason for that, sir. We will be submitting a series of supplementary order papers to remedy the deficiencies in this bill as we see them. It derives essentially from the question of who has the sovereign authority during those 3 phases to sign off on decision-making. We will be submitting SOPs on the issue of public engagement pertaining to Clause 6 to make the community forum more representative. We will require that the cross-party, the community membership be confirmed by parliamentary resolution, that the cross-party group, the Minister must heed the advice of the cross-party group, and that the Minister will have an obligation under the statute to consult with affected communities. We will be submitting SOPs on the question of powers with respect to Clause 15 and Clause 70, 71 and 72. Ruth Dyson already mentioned Clause 70 and the Law Society's concern over the fact that Clause 70 is, quote, contrary to the rule of law and proper principles of legislation, and that therefore Clause 70 is undesirable. For the Green Party, sir, it is not simply undesirable, it is unacceptable, if that is the case. We will be submitting further SOPs on a variety of clauses 10, 30, 24, 27 to ensure that the powers that are currently under the bill are not excessive to the purposes of the Act. Thank you.